Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Thank you for being here with me today. I am really looking forward to sharing today's episode with you because I just know you're going to get so much out of it. Whether you're brand new to the idea of fresh food feeding or you're a seasoned pro, this conversation with Kay Stewart, a registered veterinary technician who is a researcher, writer, and lead educator of the Feed Real Institute, is packed full of goodies on how to best feed your dog. The Feed Real Institute is such a valuable resource for fresh food feeding with tons of articles, a feeding calculator, courses, workshops, and even the Feed Real Summit, which are all designed to make feeding your dog real food a breeze. As you'll know from previous episodes, I am studying canine nutrition professionally, and I started down this path after Lucky developed health issues and I needed to learn how to make food for him. Many of us are used to turning to our vets for advice on how to support our dogs, but the majority of vets have very little experience when it comes to nutrition. My own vet is wonderful, but when it came to advising me on how to start feeding Lucky, she told me she'd really struggle to help me because it just wasn't her forte. I then had to embark down so many canine nutrition rabbit holes that I was convinced I was going to turn into a rabbit myself. But seriously, I know how utterly confusing it is when you're just trying to do the best for your dog and you don't know where to start. Or even if you've been fresh food feeding for a while, there are so many different philosophies on how to feed your dog that you sometimes wonder if you're doing the right thing. I'm hoping that this episode today will help bring you some clarity. I wanted to bring Kay on to specifically talk about something that I see popping up a lot that is possibly the biggest obstacle for pet parents when it comes to fresh feeding and is causing so much fear and worry that they just won't be able to feed their dog correctly. And this issue is how to balance your dog's food. And even more specifically, it's the debate between two philosophies of fresh food feeding: balancing nutrients over time using a rotation of ingredients versus following a fixed recipe that's formulated according to AAFCO, NRC, or FEDIAF guidelines using a spreadsheet model. In full transparency, so that you know where I stand with this, at the moment I follow a model of feeding Lucky that's based on using a rotation of ingredients in an approximate ratio of about 70 to 80% muscle meat, 10% organ meat, and 10% bone. I also add in fruits and vegetables, seeds, seaweed, eggs, sardines, and other items, but I don't tend to stick to a strict model. What is consistent in his diet is starting with the base of raw meaty bones as the central part of his diet, just as Dr. Tom Lonsdale talked about. If you didn't listen to that episode, I highly recommend it. The reason I mention that this is the way that I feed him at the moment is because I'm someone who's always open to evolving my opinions and changing my mind as more research becomes available or as situations change. So for now, this is what I'm doing with Lucky. But there are other philosophies of feeding that use the AAFCO, NRC, or FEDIAF guidelines to then mix and match specific amounts of specific ingredients to create a recipe. Some of these recipes are made up of all whole food ingredients, and some recipes fill in nutritional gaps using synthetic vitamins and minerals. The thing with a recipe model is that they do not encourage swapping out ingredients. And this brings a whole heap of worry and confusion, particularly if you can't find one of the ingredients listed and you don't know what to substitute. Have any of you had this issue before? Kay and I cover a lot of ground, including why fresh food is a better choice for your dog, the importance of using species-appropriate, bioavailable ingredients, and even some useful tips for transitioning your dog from kibble to fresh food. Kay shares her incredible expertise to help you take the fear and complication out of fresh food feeding as we demystify and debunk the guidelines to make it easier for you to embark on or to deepen your fresh feeding journey. You'll come away with some helpful tips and resources, whether you just want to start by adding fresh food toppers to your dog's kibble or you want to up your DIY raw game. There's something for everyone. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Kay. Welcome to the Mystic Dog Mama podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today.
I'm so excited to be here.
This is a conversation I have been looking forward to, and I think is just so needed in the kind of wider space of how do we start to nourish both our dogs and ourselves
Mhm.
with a focus on fresh food feeding. And so I think you're the perfect person to have this conversation with today around why fresh feeding is important. And also, I wanted to, in our conversation today, sort of address some of the concerns that I see a lot of pet parents having around how do I know what to feed my dog? I hear about the FEDIAF, the AAFCO, the NRC guidelines. How do I know that I'm actually meeting that? What about all these spreadsheets? All of that kind of confusion that can often become paralyzing when it comes to starting to feed your dog. So I wanted to focus on let's debunk some of this. Let's make it easy and get people feeding their dogs fresh food.
Absolutely.
Yay, yay. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit about your background and about Feed Real as an institute.
Perfect. Yes, so I am a veterinary technician. I graduated from the Purdue University's veterinary technology program. Back in the early 80s, I was one of the first 5 classes that graduated. And I got into private practice and I was bored, I guess is the right word. It was too routine. It was a small animal practice in a rural town. And so I started looking around, and the local university where I was living, the University of Notre Dame, was just opening some big animal research facilities. I never thought I'd do animal research, but I saw it as my chance of being the voice for the animals. And so I went in as a vet tech, ended up being in management within a year, and actually attained a faculty position there and was able to mentor all of the students that wanted to go on to vet school. I was able to mentor them and help them get into vet school. So as my research side of it, like I said, I was the advocate for the animals, and I made sure that the lives that they had were the best they could have during those projects. And if projects weren't going well, I could help stop them or redirect them. But that said, it was still very, very taxing on me because I was still very out of alignment with my love for animals. And luckily, we didn't use dogs and cats. So I didn't have the bonding as much, but you still bond with other animals. So it was hard. You're constantly breaking the bond and dealing with the humans that I worked with and helping them deal with it. So it was hard, but I was there for 32 years when it abruptly ended. They eliminated my position, and my whole world was shaken up. But it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me because I was really out of alignment, and because I had a chance to reflect on what was going on with my life. And I really turned my whole life upside down. I worked in the human medicine field for about 3.5 years, right during COVID. Don't recommend that. I was a receptionist for an urgent care center. And so I was not happy with that, but it paid the bills. And then I found this position at the Feed Real Institute in 2021 as a part-time research writing for dog nutrition. Like, how could I not apply for this position? It was perfect for me. Research, writing, and dogs are like, blending those 3 was the perfect answer for me. So I took on the position. I was working part-time and full-time at the other job, and was a year later was able to drop the other job and just work for the Feed Real Institute full-time. So since 2022, I've been working full-time, and that's when we were able to really get our courses going, and we're exhibiting at vet conferences and pet expos, and just trying to get the word out there that feeding fresh food to dogs is the way to feed them. But ironically, I wasn't doing that until I joined the Feed Real Institute.
Wow.
Right. I never questioned the whole, feed your dog kibble. I haven't had my own dog for over 6 years. So when I took the job with Feedreal, I did not have a dog, but it was a constant paradigm shift for me that first year of everything that I was taught in vet tech school and everything that, I had always believed with the veterinarians was turned upside down between feeding, vaccinations, spay, neuter, everything. And so it's been a whirlwind of learning, and I absolutely love it. I learn every day. And all I want to do is share this information with dog parents and let them see that there is a better path.
Absolutely. I can relate because I think we're indoctrinated via the big pet food industries, which also fund a lot of the veterinary schools that fund a lot of the research, et cetera. They're
Absolutely.
embedded.
Absolutely.
The whole corporate thing is embedded in the whole system. And so that then translates into as well the way that the marketing is like, this is a complete imbalanced diet and all of that, that you as a pet parent start to believe this is not only the best way, but the only way for me to feed my dog. And right. For me, it took my dog getting sick and not doing well and refusing to eat any kibble, but would eat fresh food, that I was like, okay, something's going on. And it started this mirroring process. I talk about in the podcast all the time that I believe dogs are our mirrors. And I think that they are on absolutely every level. And one of the things that popped up for me is I started looking at fresh food feeding. And I should say, I can relate to other pet parents who are afraid to make that jump, because that was me. I was convinced that I had to be feeding him the kibble to make sure he got all the vitamins and minerals that he needed, but I topped with fresh foods. And I saw he was just eating the toppers and leaving everything else. Yeah. And it reflected back to me as well. I know that ultra processed foods are bad for me.
Right.
I wouldn't feed myself them all day, every day for my whole life. Why would I do that for my dog? And it was a paradigm shift. Like you're saying, like something happens and you're like, well, hold on a second. But I think where I struggled, and this is where I'm really excited to have this conversation today, is I didn't know where to turn. I went to my vet, who is an absolutely wonderful human being and wonderful soul. But she said to me, nutrition's not my forte. I don't know how to guide you in this. And I think that's true of most vets. They get very little nutrition education when they're at school. And so they're not necessarily the trusted resource to go to, but then there's so many disparate things on the internet. Where do you even start? And it becomes really overwhelming. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you as somebody who has a real background on both sides of this, with how people can start thinking about what the benefits are of feeding fresh and how they can start making steps either at the very beginning of, just like I was doing, of adding toppers, to making the full switch into doing your own DIY raw, for example, that there's the full spectrum that you can enter in at wherever you are in that journey. So
absolutely. And that's where we, I think, differ from some of the raw companies and fresh food companies, is that we want to meet every dog parent where they are and where they're comfortable. Not everybody is ready to make that full switch or comfortable with it. And that's okay. You need to work at your own pace and in your own time. Just adding even like 10 to 20% fresh on your dog's bowl is going to enhance their overall health and well-being greatly. And there's some really good studies. And that's where my research background comes in, as I dig and find these studies. Almost all nutrition studies on humans have been researched on dogs at some point because of the similarities. So if I can find research that used dogs that they then extrapolated to humans, then that study is relevant to dogs. And that's where I have really mined the data, if you will, and shown that there is a lot of studies out there. And there are several of us that have really perfected this skill, and we have found these studies, and we have put together databases, and like we have one article on the Feedreal Institute page that's called The Science Behind Fresh Feeding, and it shows all different articles. And this is a great resource to show your veterinarian, so that, because a lot of them, that's the argument, there's no science behind this. There's so much science behind it. You just have to know where it is. And so you're right, there's just so much on the internet. And one of the things that sets us apart is we don't use blogs and we don't use opinions in our course. It's all science-backed. I put all the references at the end of each article. People can go to it. Some of them are just the abstracts because there's a pay gate behind there, but I've been able to get to all those articles because of my affiliation with the university. And so I have the ability to really, really delve in deep and then bring that up to the level so that people can understand what's going on. And so it doesn't have to be so complicated. And I think that's the biggest thing, is we need to take the fear out of fresh feeding. And I think that's what your goal is today, is that we can do that and get people on board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess if you were to sort of summarize, and I know this is asking a lot for, it's a big question in many respects, but for somebody who is new to the idea of fresh feeding, first of all, what are some of the downsides of kibble? Why are we looking at fresh food? And what is fresh food doing that kibble is not doing for our dogs?
Sure. So kibble is an ultra processed food, and veterinary medicine is the only medical field that's telling you to feed ultra processed food. Your doctor, all your medical professionals are saying, get away from ultra processed food, eat fresh food. The veterinary world is telling you the opposite. And like you said, that's what they've been indoctrinated into. They went through vet school that were sponsored by big kibble companies, and they were told that we've got the nutrition covered. You don't need to worry about that. And with everything else they have to learn, they're like, okay, great, that's taken care of. So I get it, but we need to get past that at this point. So what are the downfalls of kibble? It's ultra processed. That means it's cooked 4 to 6 times at very high heat. When you cook anything at such high heat, you create very dangerous products, end products. And those are what can cause cancer and other inflammatory diseases. So kibble doesn't have the bioavailability to it either. You're giving out, because they've overcooked everything, all the vitamins have basically been denatured and minerals have been destroyed or compromised. So if you look at the end of your label on the pet food that you're feeding, it's all of these vitamins and minerals that have been added back. Well, why did they add them back? Because they've been destroyed. Synthetic vitamins and minerals do not do the same thing in the body. In fact, sometimes they are taken in more and then they get toxic, or they don't take them enough and they become deficient. So those are some of the big things with kibble. They have synthetic vitamins and minerals. They have these end products from all the processing that are very dangerous, and the bioavailability isn't there. So your dog is constantly trying to process food. A lot of it comes out the back end unprocessed. You have these large stinky poops because that's undigested, unprocessed kibble. So those are really good indications that the dog's not processing, and they're sluggish, and they, after they eat, they just kind of want to lay around because their body's working so hard. And with their body working so hard at that, it doesn't have time to work all the other things it needs to be doing, like preventing disease and keeping everything healthy. And so then you have this myriad of diseases forming. With fresh food, the first thing you're going to notice is your dog poops a lot less and has energy because they're not taking all that energy to process. And then all of these health issues start to go away. Itchy skin, achy joints, even cognitive behavior in older dogs changes very quickly. And so the fresh food is bioavailable. They're getting the natural vitamins and minerals that they need. They are not expending all that energy to process kibble, and it's not going to cause all that inflammatory process in their body. And that's why we really want to push fresh food for dogs.
Absolutely.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for that. I would add on to that too, that something that I saw, and just as a kind of, I guess, heads up for people who do make the switch, your dog will stop drinking as much water. That was a huge thing that I saw with Lucky, is because he was getting all of his hydration from his food versus being dehydrated by his food.
Exactly. That's one of the really downsides of kibble, is it's not even 10% moisture. And it's really hard for the dogs to stay hydrated. When I transitioned my daughter's cats, that was one of the first things she said, Mom, they're not drinking water. I said, that's because their food contains 80 to 90% liquid, and they don't need the water as much. So you're right. That is one of the things you'll notice right away.
Yeah, and it's something you shouldn't be concerned about. That's actually a
No,
good sign. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
You're getting
absolutely.
it.
Exactly. So building off from that, I think it's useful now to start talking about how the pet foods are kind of regulated through organizations like AAFCO, the NRC, and the FEDIAF. That when you were looking at a bag of kibble, for example, it will tell you if it's certified by one of those organizations, depending on where you are in the world.
Mhm.
AAFCO and the NRC in the US, FEDIAF in Europe, but there's similar kind of
Absolutely.
guidelines
Mhm.
that determine what needs to go in a pet food. And so I wondered if you could talk about where did that research even come from? Because I think that's
Yeah.
the first thing to question is like, where does that come from and how is that
Right.
being applied to the dry food? And then we can get into how that's being applied to the real food.
Sure. So AAFCO, the American Association of, what is it? Feed controllers. I mean, it's not even a pet food name, was all about animal feed. And this was livestock feed until the 50s and 60s when all the people were starting to have pets and they're like, we can apply this to the pet food industry. And that's why when it went from feed to food, because food sounded better in your home, and they started making these fancy bags because who wants just this feed bag in their house? And so it was a lot of marketing that went into it. They have AAFCO has no authority to regulate. They have guidelines. There is no authority at all. It's a private nonprofit organization that has guidelines that in order for pet food to put on their certain things on their label, they have to follow these guidelines if they want to say they're complete and natural or complete and balanced. And then they have all these rules about all these other words like natural and if it's meat or if it's whatever products in there, they have all these rules as to how much has to be in there and all that. But it's just rules, it's guidelines, it's not law. The NRC, the National Research Council, is a group that went through and goes through all of these research articles and makes recommendations based on research articles that they review. All of those research articles are dogs that are fed kibble. There are no research articles reviewed of dogs feeding fresh or raw food. The last time NRC put out their recommendations was 2006. That's almost 20 years ago. So all this research that's happened since then is not included, including anything about fresh and raw. So they need to come out with new recommendations, and then AAFCO can apply those. But like I said, everything that they are looking at is kibble based. And we know that kibble has synthetic vitamins and minerals to make it come up to the level that they think dogs need. So that right there really bothered. I have a copy of the NRC guidelines, and to read through it is difficult because all of it it's doing is quoting different articles that you go back and try and find, which most people can't find those articles. I have trouble finding some of them. And they're making recommendations based on those. They're not doing feed trials. AAFCO's not doing feed trials. The pet food companies do the feed trials. So, and they can take dogs out of the feed trials, and it's a minimal number of dogs. We can go through all of those, but it's very frustrating because that's not transparent. Pet parents see that complete and balanced on there. They see AAFCO approved, whatever wording is on there, and they think they're getting this complete and balanced diet. The other thing that I have come across is several articles where they have gone in and tested these pet foods, and they are not what is claiming on the label, because they don't have to test every batch. They make one type, that's what they're going to do. They're not testing each batch. There's no quality control there. So what you're getting is not what's on the label. And this is especially true if you're trying to do an elimination diet for allergies. They have found things in there that it says there was one that said it was a pork and duck meal. There was not pork, lamb and duck meal. There was no lamb in it. It was chicken instead. And chicken is extremely allergenic for a lot of dogs. So bottom line is you can't trust what's on that label. And so again, that's where a lot of frustration's coming in with dog parents. And they're saying, wait a minute, how can I feed my dog know what I'm giving? And that's where we say, make your own fresh food, or find a fresh food or a raw food company that's very transparent with what they're doing. That's our recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you start digging into the pet food industry, it becomes terrifying, quite frankly, of what's actually in the food. And I don't want to frighten people, but I do think it's worth looking at this and questioning. We were just talking before we started recording about questioning some of the long-held beliefs generally we have in our lives, right? Like having a little crack. And I'm hoping that this interview provides a little bit of a crack into that as well, so that people can start to look at, well, is this necessarily true? And I found that as well. When Lucky started presenting his issues when I switched him over from a puppy kibble. And again, I kept him on a puppy kibble because I didn't think that I knew enough to be able to put him on a fresh food diet. And so anyone who thinks that way, I'm here to tell you that is not true. You can absolutely do this. So you don't have to do what I did. But I was topping his food with the fresh food. And when I switched him at 1 year old over to an adult formula of the same brand, it was like just a watershed of problems started. And some of that, it also, speaking about bioavailability, I think it's worth bringing up species appropriate stuff.
Absolutely.
Because this was during when we still were fearing that there was a link between grains and DCM in dogs. And so I was looking at all of the grain-free options, and the one that I got, one of the primary proteins was actually chickpeas or garbanzo beans. And I thought, that's okay. That's okay. But come to find out, that is not a species appropriate food for a carnivore. And having to look at dogs as they are carnivores. They are not omnivores. They are facultative carnivores, which means that yes, they can eat some plant products, but they cannot survive on a diet of just plant proteins. And so I wondered if you could actually touch a little bit on that, how people might think about species appropriate foods as they're thinking about fresh.
Right. So I think you're going to have some arguments that people will say they can survive on all plant, and
I should say thrive. Then I will switch it to thrive.
Exactly what I was going to say. They can survive, but are they thriving? And there's a lot of schools of thought about that. But the bottom line is, if you look at their anatomy, look at their mouth, they are carnivores. Those teeth are carnivorous. They want to grasp, pull, bite, chomp, swallow. They're not counting their chews. They're just chomping and swallowing. And that's what they're supposed to do. And so species appropriate is extremely important. And one of the big things that dogs as a species need are bones. And people are like, bones? I can't give my dog bones. I've always been told not to give bones. Well, you're right. Cooked bones, you never want to give. A species appropriate diet for dogs includes raw meaty bones. It includes muscle meat and organs, because those are the things that they're going to go for if they were eating out in the wild. Watch their wolf documentaries and what they go for. And so creating a diet that has those species appropriate foods, bone is a huge impact on them. It keeps their mouth much healthier. By 85% of the dogs have periodontal disease. And why is that? Because they're not getting chewing opportunities. Greenies are not chewing opportunities. They're full of carbohydrates, just like the kibble. So going to that, dogs need protein and animal fat to have ideal body condition. They have absolutely zero requirement for carbohydrates. That is one thing that all nutritionists will agree on. And yet they still put anywhere from 30 to 70% carbohydrates in kibble. And so that is where all of the issues are coming from, because dogs are not built to process that much carbohydrates. They have adapted, and people, this is one of the arguments, they have adapted to process some carbohydrates. They have a gene that has allowed them to produce more amylase in their pancreas. And some breeds of dogs have more of this gene and some have very little. And you don't know when you've got your dog unless you have it genotyped and, and know how many genes it's carrying. The bottom line is, even if it's carrying that gene to allow for some carbohydrate digestion, it's not 70% carbohydrate digestion. That's just too hard on the body. That's why we're getting so much diabetes in dogs, because that pancreas is having to work overtime. That's why we're getting pancreatitis in dogs. They say it's from fat. It's not. It's from overworking due to the carbohydrates. Yes, if your dog goes and gets into a vat of fat and it's going to get acute pancreatitis. Yes, that's from the fat. On a day-to-day basis, these pancreatitis dogs, it's because of that kibble that they're eating. And so it's just not species appropriate. And those are ultra processed carbohydrates. They're not plant material like fruits and vegetables. Yes, fruits and vegetables are great for dogs, but that's not the carbs we're worried about. It's the ultra processed chickpeas and those kind of carbs that are in there, rice, soy, corn, wheat, all of those dogs would not eat normally.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, exactly. And I think, yeah, I agree with you that there are schools of thought that my dog's been eating kibble for so many years and it's fine. Well, that may be true to a degree, but I think, because nature is really resilient. However, what we're talking about is a recognition of how do we start to look for providing foods that are going to provide ultimate optimal health for our dogs.
Absolutely.
There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And so the conversation really is about how do we start to look at what we can provide for our dogs so that they are thriving. And it is a species appropriate diet with fresh ingredients. Yeah.
And I think to look at the longevity of dogs, how it has declined steadily since the 1970s when kibble became mainstay in the household for dogs. A golden retriever, you're lucky to get 10 years out of right now. Used to be 17 was average back in the 70s. That is huge. How many of you that have golden retrievers would love to see them live until they're 17? And you can get that with a species appropriate diet. And so that's what we're talking about. Yes, that dog may live to 10 and be okay, have some issues, but it's not totally well. The well-being is not being addressed, and the longevity is really declined. And that's, I think, what's really sad and what people aren't realizing. The dogs that are living long lives are being fed species appropriate food.
Absolutely. I think that's the point to take home from this is remembering that they, as well, like you were saying, in terms of looking at the wolf cousins, it's true that they are not a little gray wolf perhaps in your house, but their digestive system has not evolved from it's not strayed through evolution from the wolf. It is still the same sort of physiology, anatomy, and morphology, including the fact that you were referencing the jaws and the teeth and looking at the carnassial teeth. Also, dogs cannot move their jaws from side to side like any other animal that can digest plant matter really easily, or that has that as their primary food. And so we have to look at all of these things and put the pieces together to understand what is best suited for the dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree. And that's one of the things that we really try to emphasize is this, like we said, the species appropriateness, the biologically appropriate diet. What does their body really need?
Yeah, definitely. And so when we start to look, Kay, from when we're transitioning, we're on board now that, okay, I'm going to ditch the kibble and I'm going to go over to the fresh. I'm not really sure how to start it. I'm hearing, okay, so I need some muscle meat, I need some fat, I need some organs, I can possibly add in some plant material. How do I go about thinking about this? And why am I seeing so many spreadsheets that are telling me that I need a certain number of milligrams of zinc and I need a certain amount of this and that? How do I go
Mhm.
about as a pet parent figuring this out?
I think for one thing, we need to take the fear out of it. You can do this, and there's some really, really good resources. And I'm going to talk about the Feed Real Institute resources because that's where I work. We have the easiest food calculator out there. If you go to feedreal.com/calculator, it asks you for the dog's age, weight, and activity level. And we define activity levels because people think their dogs are a lot more active than they are. Most dogs are pretty inactive. And that's if they're not getting more than an hour of exercise a day, dedicated exercise, walks, playing, that kind of thing. So you input that, and then it gives you the daily amount based on those numbers. And we base that on 2 to 3% of the dog's body weight, 2% if they're inactive, 3.5% if they're very active. And then we take that and break it down into the components that you need. There's 3 different models you can follow: the BARF diet, the PMR diet, and the ancestral diet. And we recommend the ancestral diet, but I'll talk about all 3. BARF is biologically appropriate raw food, and that's been around. Ian Billinghurst introduced this back in the 80s, and it really is saying that we need biologically appropriate food for your dog. And that includes bones, muscle meat, and organ meat. And organ meat, I'm talking about liver. They always want 5% of the meal to be liver and 5% to be another secreting organ. And that can be kidneys, spleen, pancreas, even the sexual organs, the gonads. Those are really good organ meat organ secretors, hormone secretors. And with the BARF diet, it also includes 10% of the diet to be plant material, so fruits and vegetables. The PMR, the prey model raw, is basically saying you're going to feed like a wolf would eat. And so it's bone, muscle, meat, and organs. And that's all that's in that one. But again, at the same levels for the liver and the other organ, 5 and 5, 80% muscle meat, 10% bone. We advocate for the ancestral diet because it includes seafood. And that's as part of the muscle meat. We do 10% seafood. So many dogs are lacking omega-3s. Omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory fatty acid, and it will calm the skin down. The body needs it for healthy skin, for a healthy brain, overall joint health. It just really, really helps the dog. And because the nutrients aren't real strong, as the animals that they're eating, they're not getting real high nutrients. So there's not a lot of omega-3s in some of the meat. So adding the seafood is why we put that in there. People say, well, dogs won't go out and catch fish. That may be true. Some dogs will, but they still need those omega-3s because they're lacking in the other parts of their meal. So for the ancestral diet, we say 12% bone is what we recommend, 10 to 12, but we recommend starting at 12. And then 63% muscle meat, the 10% organs, 5% liver, and 5% other organ. 10% seafood, and then 5% we want some kind of fiber. We recommend either very low glycemic vegetables, if your dog will eat vegetables, which my little dog will not, or fur. Fur has a lot of trace minerals in it that can be broken down just enough, not real well in the intestinal tract, but enough for those trace minerals to be absorbed. And so when you say fur, so I get little rabbit feet for her, furred cow ears, all different things. And because I work with Real Dog Box, I'm able to get them through there, but you can get them online all over. And so that's the calculator breaks it down to that. And the one thing that you have to source yourself, the best, or the thing that you have to source each time is the raw meaty bone. And we have a good list of what raw meaty bones to feed, how much that you need to feed based on the calculations that we do in the calculator, and then the muscle meat. So that makes it easy, but then your comment about spreadsheets, okay? the way we're suggesting you feed is not looking at a spreadsheet. It is balancing all their nutrients over time by feeding them these key components. And if you alter the type of meat that you're giving and you alter the type of bones you're giving, you're going to be giving them constant rotation of nutrients in their food. The spreadsheet is telling you, according to AAFCO, which is always based on kibble, these are the nutrients your dog needs. Now, you remember, these are based on kibble-fed dogs. And so they're based on kibble that has had synthetic or artificial vitamins and minerals added back. And you have to add a lot more of that in order to meet those requirements of what they're saying. Who knows what the real requirements are? None of us really do. And so those spreadsheets, I think they have a place for when you're starting because it kind of gives you an idea. But if you really try to find one that's perfectly balanced and you get it, you're not going to want to stray from that because you're going to be like, I finally got it perfect. And then you're going to end up feeding that the whole time. That totally negates what we're doing. You don't want to feed your dog the same thing over and over and over again. And likely you're adding artificial, synthetic vitamins and minerals to meet that. So I think it's much more appropriate to add fresh whole foods that have those vitamins and minerals in them. And knowing that if you are feeding the appropriate diet, it's almost impossible to not hit all of those nutrients. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think to your point as well that you kind of snuck it in there, but I think it's an important one to kind of bring to the fore again is nobody really knows what the optimal diet is for a dog.
Exactly.
And guess what? We don't know what it is for a human either,
Exactly.
right? Like we don't actually know. This is a little bit of guesswork. And again, it is based upon trials that were done many years ago. And there's a lot of questionable science about how the trials were actually done. Like, do they actually include enough dogs? Do they actually show a variety? Was it done over a long enough period of time to understand in terms of applying these principles for longevity? All of that has been brought under the microscope. And so to assume that they are absolutely perfect and this is an absolutely perfectly balanced meal for your dog, I think is a bit of a fallacy that we've kind of bought into.
Mm-hmm.
And something I think along those lines too is recognizing that this is somewhat esoteric, and yet it's also very rooted in science, in that when you're feeding yourself and you're feeding your dog, you're feeding that individual in front of you. And some days that body is going to require more of something than another day, and less of something than another day. We don't have the same requirements every single day. And so to feed in a way that is assuming I need exactly so many milligrams of vitamin C today or what have you, is missing the point of how the body actually works. And you can end up overloading on things when you do it that way, as well as the fear is generally of being deficient, of not actually providing enough. But I think as well, to add into this, if you are following a spreadsheet model that is saying feed so many ounces of beef liver because it's going to provide you with this number of milligrams of zinc, for example, that again is a kind of average assumption, right? Like, it doesn't take into it, there is no guarantee that that piece of beef liver that you are putting in your dog's bowl actually contains that number of milligrams of zinc. It will vary according to the individual cow, right? It's going to vary according to the individual, vary according to where that animal was raised, what that animal was eating, the stress levels of that animal. All of that stuff is going to affect the nutrient content of that piece of beef liver. So if you are working with that spreadsheet model of I've got to have exactly this amount, you're not actually putting that amount in the bowl anyway, as well as the way in which your dog's body is going to absorb things is going to be different all the time too. Just because it's going in the bowl doesn't mean it's staying in that body.
Right.
And I think those are important things to kind of bring to the conversation to sort of give a better picture of, if you're going to be using a spreadsheet model as your basis, what is that really telling you? And is that useful for fresh feed formulating?
Right. I like a lot of the points you brought up, and the first one being you are feeding the dog in front of you. And there are days, like if they are going through a very stressful time, that's a really good time to give extra vitamin C, because vitamin C is very, very good for you when you're stressed, when you're sick. I mean, look at all the advertisement for vitamin C for humans when you've got a cold. There's a lot of merit to that because vitamin C helps the body. If your dog is having mobility issues, then you need to add more items that have more collagen, more chondroitin, more glucosamine than the little dog that doesn't have those issues. So you are feeding that dog in front of you. And that's, again, one of the things that we really harp on. And spreadsheets aren't telling you that. They're just giving you this bottom line. The other thing I found difficult with spreadsheets is the database that's within them is very limited. There's nothing for fur. There's nothing for a lot of the different proteins that we can find. And we really, really emphasize to try and find novel proteins. Depending on where you are, you can maybe find a lot of different animal proteins that I may not be able to find in Nashville, Tennessee, but you may be able to find in Mexico. And those aren't going to be in that database. So it's limiting there. But again, I think it's a good way to have kind of a feel for it if you want to try one. I just wouldn't worry about basing every meal on that. So balancing over time, which is how we eat. We don't worry that breakfast, lunch, and dinner are all balanced. I don't even worry on a weekly basis if I've gotten a balanced meal. It's over time, and that's how we want to feed the dogs. Puppies are a little different. We do need to make sure they have enough of all the nutrients in a day because they don't hold on to nutrients and process them the same. But with an adult dog, it's very easy to balance over time. And when I'm saying over time, I'm saying over a few days to a week. We do acknowledge that dogs have a very shortened life, so we want to make sure everything's optimal for them as much as possible. But there's a lot of ways to do that. And I think you talked about how healthy the animals are that you're feeding them. That's huge. If you can always find organically raised, pasture-raised animals, that's ideal, because the less toxins you put in your dog, the healthier they're going to be. Right. They have very small detoxifying organs. Their liver and kidneys are small. And so if you put a lot of toxins in them, they're just working overtime to process all that. And everything that you think about that can be toxic in your household, the type of, laundry soap you're using, what the dog's laying on, because they're laying right on it and then licking themselves. They're taking in toxins so much more than we are. And so you really have to be overall conscious of that. If you're worrying about, what it is you're putting in your dog, it's not just food that's going in. You're walking them at the park that's been sprayed with Roundup, and then it's on their feet and they come home and they lick their paws. So there's so many ways that we can help the dogs, including feeding them a good fresh food diet. And that's why we really, really advocate for the organic grass-raised animals, because they are going to have a lot less toxins in them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And even if you can't find organic grass-fed or you can't afford organic grass-fed, feeding fresh food is still a step up from kibble.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any amount, even if you can't totally switch, adding, like I said, like 20% has shown amazing differences. Purdue did a study with Scottish Terriers, and they showed 70 to 90% less of them getting bladder cancer, which is something that they normally get, just by eating vegetables 3 times a week. And so, and that study, I think, was done in like 2005. So there are some studies out there that show that fresh food is really, really good for dogs.
Right.
But taking I get it. The fear of not doing it right is really what scares people. Mm-hmm. There's some really good websites. And like I said, with the Feed Real Institute, now we have a dog parent course that really walks you through why and how to feed your dog fresh food. We have a workshop that's hands-on, that we walk you through how to prepare your meals if you're not a book learner and you just want to do a hands-on. There's a lot of information in there. And like I said, I have fully vetted all of this myself, and that's all I do is sit and read and write and research and, and try to find the answers and bring it to people that they can understand and want to learn and have the opportunity to understand the benefits of fresh feeding.
That's amazing. And I would highly recommend anyone who's interested, go and check out the website just to even better understand the kinds of things you should be thinking about. And I also think the calculators are so helpful for helping people conceptualize.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like, I mean, I know this is a kind of a false diagram in many respects, but it's sort of like thinking about a food pyramid for dogs, right? Like if you could sort of envision like their bowl or their plate, what types of things should be on there. And I guess as a starting point, Kay, for somebody, obviously go and check all that stuff out. But if they're thinking, all right, I'm thinking I'd like to start topping my dog's kibble with the 20%, like you said, what types of things would be most beneficial for them to think about adding in?
So really, I think you have to look at that dog in front of you. So let's say you have a dog that's itchy, and you're knowing that kibble's probably exacerbating the problem. Adding small fatty fish would be my first recommendation, because that's going to give them the omega-3s that is going to calm that body down and decrease inflammation, and it's going to help the skin, it's going to help joints, it's going to help cognitive behavior. And so that would be, in that case, that would be the first thing I add. And if you have a dog that's starting to have mobility issues, let's get some collagen in there. So let's start with raw meaty bones. Chicken feet have tons of good collagen in them. Put a couple of those on. If some dogs won't take them raw at first. And what I had to do with my little dog is I just put a pot of boiling water, dip it in there for like 20 seconds. And it was enough to create a different texture and smell to it, and she'd take it right away. That's a really good additive for those dogs. Green lip mussel powders are great for dogs that have mobility issues, if that's where you want to start, or finding mussels at the grocery store and feeding them. They always have to be cooked, but most of them in the store are. Oysters are good. So things like that. Muscle meat's always great for dogs. They're going to chew on it. If you want to add some, good protein to their diet, that'd be something you can top with. Or you can top with all these things a little bit each day or every other day, or, just kind of mix it up. Bone broth, if you make your own homemade bone broth, is an excellent topper for kibble. Kefir, goat's milk kefir is the best. That works out really well. And there's just a ton of different things. The vegetables, if your dog will eat vegetables, putting leafy greens that have been lightly steamed. There's been a post recently about the benefits of broccoli and chopping it up really, really finely and letting it sit for about 90 minutes and adding it to your dog's bowl. Or with the broccoli sprouts, it's even a higher level of the anti-cancer properties. And so there's just a lot of things you can try and see what your dog will like. I will warn you, once you start adding toppers, your dog will leave the kibble.
That's what I found.
You had that experience. Yes. When I transitioned our dog where I'm living, within 2 weeks, she was leaving all the kibble at the bottom and just looking at me like, I'm not eating that. What else you got for me? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And as well, some of I think, the tip and trick that you gave with the chicken feet is also a really good way that if you're introducing raw meat and they're a little suspicious, like, oh, I don't know how I feel
Yeah.
about it. It doesn't mean that the dog doesn't like raw meat. It's that they've gotten accustomed to the tastes of
Right.
kibble, the salt that's in kibble, all of that. And the fact that
The
the
sugar in
sugar,
kibble. There's so
exactly.
much sugar in kibble. It's
Exactly.
addictive. And the palatants they put on it is made for the dogs to want it. They
Right.
want them to want only that one too. Some people are, oh yeah, my dog's picky. He'll only eat such and such. Well, that's by design. They don't want your dog to switch brands. So so introducing light searing of it. Some people try feeding it lightly frozen. Some dogs like it that way. There's a lot of different tricks. And again, on the website, we have a lot of tricks and tips to help you get through transitioning. And your dog just isn't used to it. It's something new, and you have to think about it that way. Air dried, which is Real Dog has the air dried products. I use that for the liver and other secreting organs because I personally don't like to handle the organs. It's just a texture thing for me. And so they have this ground 50-50 powder. She gets a teaspoon of that on her meal. And a lot of people add that as the kibble topper, is just that ground organ mix.
Mhm.
I use that we have 2 cats on the property that I have transitioned to raw. And I always add that organ mix, and I always add heart muscle to their meat. I use a grind that I buy at a co-op, but then I add those 2 things to it to enhance what they're getting. The muscle meat's really good for cats for taurine, and that's really, really important in cats.
Yeah.
So, and that's a whole other category with cats, but they're true obligate carnivores. And so them eating kibble is just ridiculous. Like they
Oh,
do not eat any carbs in their diet.
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Another trick for people that I do as well for Lucky is because I think there's also this issue that people get kind of hung up on, like, well, if I'm going to be feeding raw food or fresh food, how do I handle things like training and treating with training, that sort of a thing? And
mhm,
that can be a little bit off-putting, but there are so many ways to do it. And one of the things that I've done is I instead of looking at his bowl needs to have everything a bit like you're describing, like I
mhm,
sort of piecemeal things. So
mhm.
he loves beef heart. Lucky is like fanatic of beef heart. And so what I do is I just at a really low temperature, because I don't have a dehydrator. If I had a dehydrator, I would use that.
Mhm,
But a really low temperature in my oven for a while, I will cook some slices of beef heart and then cut them into tiny little pieces. And that's
mhm.
what I take on the walk or when I'm doing training with him or what have you.
Right,
And that's his heart component that
right.
he gets spread out via the training. But there are so many tricks that you can use with fresh
Yeah, and
feeding for also training.
especially for small dogs. And I have a good friend that's a trainer that has a small dog, and she uses almost all of her daily meal as training.
Hmm.
And you can use it as enrichment. You can hide some of the food and use it that way. There's a lot of different ways you can use food. You don't just have to plop it in front of a bowl or in a bowl in front of them. And if you present it to them in a way that they can pick and choose, you'll see that sometimes they will leave components. You were saying that some days they don't need certain parts of their meal, and dogs will leave those things. And people are like,
Yeah.
oh, he wouldn't eat his organs today. Well, he didn't feel like he needed those today.
Right.
And giving them some choices or using some of those really high value ones for the training is a really
Exactly.
good way to look at it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
so much you
this
can do.
there is so much you can do. And I think this also brings up there's a whole field called zoo pharmacognosy. And
Hmm.
I interview Rachel Knott from My Animal Matters, who focuses on that, where the dog has as we do, but we have
Hmm.
sort of gotten so mind-based and disconnected in many respects
Yes.
from our own inner knowing. But dogs naturally operate from this, where they know what their body needs. And so they will hunt out the kind of food that they need on any given day. And so when you are doing, like you're suggesting, that you could even offer it on a platter where things are separated and allow the dog to to pick what they need at that given time, rather than us projecting our fears, because this again I think comes from the conditioning
Right.
of like, oh, my dog needs to eat 2 to 3 times a day, finish the bowl, it needs to look like this, when in reality dogs often fast. In fact, we know
Right.
that fasting can be good for dogs, that some
Absolutely.
days they're going to want more muscle meat and less another day. Or I've noticed with Lucky that there are some days where he wants like 3 servings of food. And then the next day he's like, nah, not bothered, because he's had a good
Right.
feed the day before. And so
Absolutely.
working with your dog, so being observant first
Hmm.
to see it, trust your dog, trust yourself. And this can be a whole heck of a lot easier than we make it.
And it's fun. I mean, you really, it's so fun to watch them eat what you've prepared for them. And like when I'm prepping food for the dog or cats, Kona is just right there and looking at me like, what do you have for me? And sniffing everything. And she won't eat vegetables. So that's not something I push on her. But a really good example of that, where they'll hunt out what they need, is people complain about their dogs eating poop. They're looking for nutrients that is in that other dog's poop or cow poop or whatever poop they found, rabbit poop. Oh, rabbits have tons of nutrients in their poop. That's an innate thing for them to find. And the same with grass, and different things. So you're right. They are looking for the nutrients that they need, and they will help you in a lot of ways.
Mhm. Yeah, they are our guides in just so many ways. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I wanted to ask you as well about the summit that is coming up later this
Oh,
year. If you could
yes.
talk a little bit about that.
So we started our annual Feed Real Summit last October, and this one is going to be even more amazing. It's going to be a 2-day event instead of a 1-day. It's October 5th and 6th in San Diego. And we have our 4 featured speakers are set up, and that's Connor Brady, who wrote the Feeding Dog books. He's an expert on raw feeding. Nick Thompson, who's a veterinarian over in the UK, is coming. He's an expert on raw feeding. And then we have Karen Becker and Rodney Habib that are coming, that wrote The Forever Dog, and they are coming out with their new book, Forever Dog Lives, I think is the name of it. They're going to be there also. So those are our 4 primary speakers, and then we're lining up a whole group of others. We're going to have activities. We'll have a live workshop. We're going to have, I think we're going to have a live workshop on creating meals, and then we're going to have another one on, I think we're going to do like enrichment ideas. We're still figuring it all out, but those are 4 primary people that we have locked in. We had vendors last year that had all kinds of things to offer. We had the VIP tickets include being able to meet the speakers and talk one-on-one at a mixer at the end. And you can do add-ons with the workshops and things like that on your ticket. So we're still working out all the details, but it's promising to be an amazing event. Again, we had so much positive feedback last year. It was such a good day, exhausting day.
I can imagine.
I keep thinking we're doing 2 days this year, but we have a lot of the logistics worked out. I'm so excited for it. And plus I get to be in San Diego for a couple, probably at least a week beforehand, which is always fun. And so, no, it's an event. If you go to feedreal.com/summit, you can get all the information. You can get on the list, get the updates. It's going to be, you don't want to miss this event if there's any way you can get to San Diego. We do not do any recording. It's all a live event only. So you're immersed into the experience, and that's what we want to have.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun. And San Diego is a wonderful place to have a summit.
Oh, any time of year, but when we did it last October, it was so beautiful. And it's one of my favorite places to go. And the fact that the company is headquartered there is just a plus with my job. I go at least once a year, if not twice.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. The perks.
Yes.
Hey, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be important for somebody who's looking to feed their dog fresh food to know?
I think we've covered it, but just don't be afraid of screwing up. You're not going to screw up. You're going to get to know your dog as they are eating, what it is that you're offering. Work with your dog, observe your dog, and have fun with it. And just don't be afraid. And there's so many resources. And if you are a book learner, take that dog parent course and learn from it. We have a professional course also for veterinary professionals and any dog professionals. If you want to get even deeper into it, you don't have to be a vet to take that. The workshops are a great way to be introduced to everything. There's so many ways to make you comfortable. And then I think once you get past that fear factor, you'll really find out how much you enjoy it.
It is a lot of fun, and it's so satisfying, and
It really is.
at like such a deep level. I mean, I've talked a little bit on other episodes about how having that kind of bond with Lucky has been so important to our relationship and to my own health, and just feeling like it just feels really good. And yes, it takes a little bit longer than reaching into a bag of kibble and putting it into the bowl, but the rewards just are so incredibly immense. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to do for your dog and for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I wanted to ask you one final question that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
And this is, what have dogs, whether that's your own dogs or other dogs you've worked with, dogs in general, what have they taught you about what it means to be human?
I think dogs have taught me to be in the present, because they aren't ever looking at the past or looking at the future. They are right there in the now. And that's what I love about being with dogs, is it brings me to the present. And that's really important to me. because I am one that's always 3 or 4 steps ahead and running through life. And so every time I'm around a dog, it's like, no, stop, breathe, and be present. And so the more I'm around dogs, the more presence I have. And I really, really value that.
That's beautiful. And I have the same experience with dogs. That's one of the big
Yeah.
lessons they've taught me. Kay, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for just your generosity of time, energy, spirit, knowledge. This is going to be so helpful for so many people. I'm really grateful that you spent the time
Absolutely.
with me today.
I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. And just like I said, go to that feedreal.com and get a ton of information. And there's information there on how to get a hold of us. You can ask questions. We're there for you.
Perfect. And I'll leave all of those links in the show notes too. So if people want to link directly to that, they can click there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Kay Stewart of the Feed Real Institute. There are a few things that I hope you take away from this conversation. The first thing is that you see that there's no one way to feed your dog. There are a number of ways you can meet his or her nutritional needs through fresh food feeding. And so I hope this helps to alleviate any fears or concerns that you might have had. Along these lines, another thing I hope you take away is that it's so important to feed the dog in front of you. Learning what is best for your dog can be a bit of a trial and error process, where you figure out what your dog likes, what they do best on, and what they need at various stages in their lives. Fresh feeding is really flexible, and so it can be adapted to your individual pup. The other thing I hope this chat illuminated for you is that the guidelines that AAFCO, NRC, and FEDIAF use as advisory bodies are based specifically on kibble-fed dogs. As Kay mentioned, the process for making kibble destroys much of the nutrient content of the food, and therefore synthetic vitamins and minerals need to be added back in quantities that are greater than what are required when you're feeding your dog fresh food ingredients. It's also worth noting that the guidelines are for the minimum requirements, not optimum requirements. All of this is to say that they're really just guidelines and not a hard and fast rule. I hope this episode helps you assess what feeding philosophy resonates most with you and your dog on your own fresh feeding journey. If you have any questions about how to best feed your pup, please feel free to DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. You can find out more about Feed Real, their courses, workshops, and the upcoming Feed Real Summit on their website, feedreal.com. I've also left this link in the show notes. Finally, a quick note that this episode was sponsored by Aspirationary, which, in full transparency, is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to help you become all you aspire to be. You can check out our shadow work and moon magic journals and workbooks, as well as our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens on Instagram at Aspirationary. Okay, until next time.